Thank you for everyone who's out here tonight. I am Angie. I'm a member of the Rally Ringers. Dave Harris is not with us tonight. He sends his regrets, but he knows we're in good hands. We have some really great panelists. So part of this is necessitated because we've had such a huge shift in what we're able to do. But part of this is this technology has been coming, and a lot of us have been interested in this and maybe wondering if this is something we could do and maybe didn't know where to start. I know there's been resources through HMA. There's also been some changes in the last few weeks that I've seen in licensing and other things for this period of time. So maybe that's also driving people, but you know, I think all of us are missing music and missing being together. And we can take that feeling now and really process that. But also once we are back to having live performances, the reality is there's going to be some people that aren't going to be able to come, whether they're not comfortable or there's going to be capacity restrictions in some of our locations. And just, you know, we always have a subset of population who, whether it's health or a physical, if something physically prevents them, or they just need to be connected another way. So it's good for us to be thinking about these technologies and how we can expand our audience to include people who maybe can't readily get to see us physically in person. So I don't want to take too much time. We are going to kind of break this night up into 3 sections. So we're going to talk about recording and miking first. So we'll kind of do that. We're going to have a couple of our panelists give an overview, and then we'll have a Q&A for that section. And then later we'll talk about our other topics. But we thought we'd start out kind of with each of the sections and do the Q&A with them so it didn't get too crazy at the end, or make you hold a question till the entire end either. So first I want to invite our panelists for our first portion, so recording and miking. We have Bob Avant, who's from Austin, Texas, and he's the director of the Austin Handbell Ensemble and the Baylor Bronze Handbell Ensemble at Baylor University. He has over 15 years of experience in recording handbell ensembles, including working for Alfred Publishing, Jeffers, and Choristers Guild to create demo CDs for new music mailings. He has also recorded and prepared several community group CDs. Starting more than 8 years ago, Bob was an early adopter of live streaming technology for both of his groups and continues to expand and grow his knowledge as technology advances. And together with Derek Nance, Bob has streamed the concerts for the HMA National Seminar for the last 3 years. And our other panelist for recording and miking is Andy Punch. And Andy Punch is here local to us in North Carolina, and he began digitally recording handbell choirs, vocal choirs, organs, and bands in 1990. He's also a handbell soloist and director, and he currently serves as the recording engineer and post-production audio engineer for the Rally Ringers. And he didn't put this in there, but I'll also add that he is also an alumnus of the Rally Ringers. So I'll let you guys take it away, and we'll go from there.
All right, I think I'm up first. We're going to try to tag team this, and forgive us if we step on each other's toes or forget something and the other takes over, because we haven't presented this before. So anyway, there's that. Thanks. It's so good. I think I see 68 people watching. That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking time and spending some time with us. I think this is a good order to start with this evening, because what we talk about in the respect of audio recording will carry through to the live stream portion in particular. So I think this is a good order. All right, well, we'll just jump right in. I always like to begin with the end in mind when you look into technology. As a technology consultant for 17 years or so, I brought that up to school districts all the time. You know, they have lots of solutions, but what's the problem? You know, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? So I think for handbell folks, there are several potentials here. One is that you want to just record for your own individual practice. And to do that, any kind of recording device, the simpler the better, will suffice. In tandem with that, there's no post-production. You just record it and go. So there's there's that level for that. Informal archiving is the next one I have set up. And that can be, you can utilize kind of an entry level or a basic type of recording system. And for that, there's either little or no post production out of it. So we're still kind of informal level so far. Moving up the scale a bit to post onto social media. Now we're wanting to get a little more technical and a little more higher quality put together for this. I would call it mid-level equipment would be needed, and some post-production would be needed as well. Which, and as Andy would also add, I'm sure, post-production is a whole nother set of knowledge, skills, and abilities and tools involved. So there is that part of it as well for social media. And I think for handbell ensembles, that's probably where we will live the most in this category. So mid-level equipment. Moving up from that would be if you're producing like a CD or DVD or some kind of something in the production where it's really going to be released out there in the world. Now you're talking getting a much higher level set of equipment with a lot of post production involved with that. And I'll add one more category to all of this, and that is using the audio for live streaming. For this one, we'll back up, and we only need like the mid to high level equipment for live streaming. And there, obviously, since it's live, there's no post production associated with that. But one caveat, one little tip for you: if you are doing live sound in your facility and you're running live streaming, it's important to if you have headphones on and you're trying to blend everything in, and you're going to hear what the sound sounds like in that space through the headphones even. That's different than what the mics pick up only. And so you have to be cognizant of what you're listening to and therefore what you're sending out. I would suggest using an aux out on a mixer and use headphones on that. And that would be a cleaner idea of what is being delivered through the live stream for that. So Andy, you want to jump in with some equipment thoughts?
Sure. The very basic thing is the smartphone. And they sometimes have stereo mics, sometimes mono. I use the smartphone for my bell choir as feedback. And another option I've heard of somebody using is a laptop computer mic. On this one, it's right there next to the camera. That's not going to sound great, but you have it, and you will need some recording software to make that happen. That's the basics.
One word, and on those, the reason that the smartphone and the like iPads and the built-in mic thing are not necessarily the best way to go is because those mics are generally geared towards voice and the range of the voice, and handbells have an extended range, so they tend to not hear the very low frequencies as clearly as external mics would. So I just add that comment to what he was talking about.
Totally true. This is just a minimum. You can attach microphones to smartphones sometimes. That'll help a little bit. But this is just something that you might happen to have around already. And then the next level up, as Bob mentioned, we think most people will be interested in. A stereo or mono USB mic. Here's one. It's pretty good. Allows you to select from multiple patterns, plug it into a computer with recording software, and you get a decent sound out of it. Another idea is a handheld recorder, which can have its own mics built in, and ideally XLR inputs at the bottom, which would allow you to hook up professional mics in the future. you get some expansion capabilities. This one has phantom power, so there are many professional mics that would work with that. There are several companies out there that do this. Zoom, by coincidence, Sony, Edirol, Tascam, there are lots. And the flexibility of these is high. I actually use this one as a backup recorder for CDs, digital outputs into that. Next level, once you start getting into professional gear, the world is huge, and you're going to want something with those XLR inputs, a mic with that like that, and gosh, there's so many options. But starting with great condenser mics is a really good idea. It'll make a huge difference in the sound. Then you've got to have some shock mounts for them because, well, somebody's going to do that to your mics at some point if you don't. Good stands that will protect the valuable microphones, and then it just keeps growing. A good mic preamp and a mixer, USB connection to a computer, or you could just plug into one of these things. And you can go as far as what Bob and I have done, getting multiple microphones and multi-track recording capability and professional recording software with noise reduction. But the USB mic and one of these, good place to start.
I'm going to jump in. We had a question in the chat before we kind of move to the next portion. I'm sorry to break up your flow, but they asked if you guys have any brand suggestions for like a mid-level mic that maybe something is looking more than your phone or more than that, but maybe not going crazy just yet.
Well, that's a big rabbit hole to go down. I would probably shy away from mentioning a specific model kind of thing right now, and just say that the general price range of that would be like in the, I guess, probably $200 to $400 range for really decent mics. What do you think, Mandy? Is that about right?
Sure. I was thinking of an AKG 214, which is around there. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want that to go unaddressed.
It's okay. In fact, there will be possibly many questions, and we can answer those later. Emails is a good idea. Next section, where we talk about the major factors on the sound. There are many different handbell sounds recording sounds out there, and I've broken it down to the setup, the gear that's used, and the sound of the room itself. One thing that I like to capture, especially for CD recordings, is the distance of the microphone to the bell choir. It determines the bell room balance and the tonality of the bells somewhat. And I've got 3 examples of what has actually been done with various CD recordings. And Bob and I both use something in this list. The first one is microphones about 3 feet or less from the handbells. And when you do that, you get a ringer level of detail, or even more than what the ringer hears, and very little room. Next, maybe a director's level detail about 6 feet or so away from the bell tables. You capture some of the room. Of course, the type of mic you're using will determine how much. When you get 12 to 20 feet away, you start getting an audience level of detail, less low bass, a significant amount of the sound of the room, which might be a good thing sometimes. Bob hasn't heard this stuff yet in detail, so I'm glad it's fun. The table setup, that's often determined by the room. There's some limitations there, but for a full group, ideally U-shape is used, something sort of like this. There we go. And semicircle, like that. Put the mics in the middle. That can sound pretty good. 1 long row or 2 rows, that's much more challenging to get an even sound across the whole bell group. Whatever you do, though, that setup, measure it, and take pictures. Reason for that, you gain understanding, you can have future improvements, which is the direction you want to go, and reproduce it in case you get something perfect. I got a really great sound at my Mandy once. I didn't measure, and I don't know how to get it back exactly right. So I really wish I'd measured. Another thing that affects the sound of the bell recording, of course, the pickup direction. Many mics pick up in the front. In fact, all of them do, but they'll also pick up from the side a bit, depending on the pattern, and a tiny bit from the back. And this is a directional mic, a cardioid, mainly picks up from the front. It'll still pick up some of the room sound. It can provide really good stereo imaging, but it has less bass at a distance than what the ear hears. That can be okay. Omnidirectional mics are the opposite of that. They pick up from all around pretty much evenly. They pick up more of the sound of the room, which could be a good thing, and more bass than the ear hears. They have a very pure tone, but they can contribute to some vague stereo imaging. There are plenty of other polar patterns out there, including figure 8, which I know Brian uses for mid-side purposes, but we have a limited amount of time. So I'll just go on to say that professional mics are powered. These are called condenser mics. The USB mic I showed, the handheld recorder, they all use power to make the microphone work. And we are pretty much not recommending this mic. It's a dynamic vocal mic, which just doesn't have quite the sensitivity one would want for a handbell recording, but it does well with really loud sources. Okay, so what else affects the sound? The room, which I've talked about a few times. A room can have incredibly absorptive things in it, almost no reflections back. If you've ever played outside, you know the extreme end of that. Then a room can also provide way too much reverb, as in really bright treble, incredible echo. Ideally, you get something that either is not too absorbent and somewhat reflective, like a really good concert hall. That's fantastic. People have different ideas about this, though. Sometimes you want to record in a room that is not very reflective. Then you can add whatever additional reverb you want to in post-production on a computer, usually. But if you get a great sounding room, you're going to want to capture the sound of that, like a concert hall or certain churches. And either ideal mic placement will take care of it, or you can put some extra mics in the back to allow you to mix those in later on. Noises become an issue. Sometimes you can control them, sometimes you can't. Some places you can turn off the air conditioning or the fan. Sometimes the buzzy lights you can turn off. If I was recording in here, I would unplug my refrigerator. And then sometimes you can't. There might be a lawnmower or traffic, airplane, birds, or rain, hailstorm. All these things have happened to me and interfered with recordings. Bob also mentioned additional live instruments when we were working on this, and I find it a challenge to get the balance just right, especially given how loud certain instruments can be, such as trumpet and pipe organ. And how do you get the best sound of the handbells along with this really loud instrument? Place the instrument far away, perhaps, but the issue with that is the tone quality of it changes. So you might need to add an extra mic, and that's where you get into multi-mic world. That's the short version of my 1 hour Pinnacle class.
All right. Let me throw some thoughts in here as well. And by the way, this is mic placement and selection and room choice falls into the category as music does. There are many, many right answers and seldom a wrong one. It's just a preference or a taste or whatever. So I'll throw out some additional ideas. I'm sure than Andy has shared. I'll probably skip the ones he shared. I I'm on board with everything. Everything's right. Something came to mind when he was talking about the added instrument. I did a recording session with a handbell group. I'll give two examples. One is we were in a medium to a large sounding room, and we had a flute. And so, if you put the flute at the table level, then you get that balance with the bells. You have no control over if it's too loud or too soft. It is what it is. So your ability to control balance of added instruments is by distance from the microphone. So in that example, I added a couple extra length of XLR cables, and I put that person, I'd say at least 25 feet back, and way back, and put a separate mic on the flute player and recorded it as a separate track. And so I came back later in post-production and blended that according to balanced taste in with the handbells. And so I was able to control balance by doing that, as opposed to a fixed balance. Tambourines do the same kind of damage. If you play a tambourine with the handbells, you get what you got, unless you can do something separated by distance with an extra mic. The other one, I think Carolyn, I saw your name on there. We did a recording session with Concert Bells Fort Worth for Choristers Guild once, and it called for oboe, and Carolyn played that. I had her out the door, another 4 or 5 feet outside the door, again with an extra mic on her for that purpose, and was able to blend it in quite well as a result. So anyway, there's that. Rooms. There are two purposes going here. There's you want to do a recording for performance level kind of thing, social media kind of post, or you want to do a capture of a concert. I think there's two different directions here. For the one that is handbells only, no audience, just you're capturing things, I prefer a smallish kind of room that it's as dry as possible. No sound reflections, no extra reverb thrown in. I would like it as clean as possible, and that's so that I can maintain clarity of all the bell sounds, and then go into post-production and add reverb to taste. I can place an ensemble in a ginormous hall through post-production if I want to, but it would have that clarity of the sound. Whereas if you want to capture a large sanctuary with the bells up front, for example, you're going to get all the reflected natural reverb sounds of that space, and it's pretty hard to undo those kinds of sounds. You can to a degree post-production, but it's really difficult to get rid of those. But it's really easy to add them in. So that's the direction I like to go on that. Mic placement, and I have some thoughts on that. And let's see if I can get here. Hi, Derek. All right. Let's see. Can you see my hand?
Yes.
All right, awesome. I created a doc cam for this tonight. So all right, so here's a standard kind of U shape, and if you put if you want to put the ears of the listener kind of where the director is, kind of in that location, there's a problem because the distance.
Hey, Bob.
Oh, yep.
I'm sorry, I was going to say one thing. For those of you not super familiar with Zoom, up on the top right-hand corner of your screen, the Brady Bunch screen, you'll see an option to switch to speaker view. So you can see the what Bob is drawing a little bit clearer if you want to make that bigger. Sorry, go ahead.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks. So distance, it matters here. So the distance from where you place a mic, for example, let's say it's a single mic, just for argument's sake here. Put a single mic here, the distance to the top end of the table is that. Well, the distance to the corner, it's much further. The distance to the back table is a little bit longer. The distance to that corner, back right corner, is again longer. So distance matters, and that causes issues with balance. So what I like to see is, and my favorite layout is to put a mic on the top table area, and it kind of listens. I'll say it listens kind of in this kind of a range. I'll put a mic on the lower table, and again, it kind of listens in that range. And then I have a stereo mic that's a single microphone, but it has a stack of 2 microphones built into it, and you can turn them so that you get a nice cross pattern out of it. I'll put that here in the middle, and I'll point one end kind of listening this way, and I'll point the other one kind of going that way. So, and they truly overlap in that respect. So with that kind of a layout, you're able to get an equidistant sound pickup for the group to do that. This is kind of the higher level scenario. For a lot of years, I used a single stereo mic to capture handbell ensembles, and that worked pretty well, but I always had a problem with these corners. In particular, this one, where the C4 usually lives. It's just a little bit farther away, and that range has a hard time projecting anyway. So I found that adding this fourth fourth microphone in really made a difference for that. So there's that. Are there any questions about U-shape? Because I've got other ones here too. But okay, cool. Here's a fun one. Can you see that okay?
2 rows.
2 rows, exactly. Usually, in my groups...
towards you just a tiny bit. We're missing the top. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great. Usually it's like treble and then bass, but not always. And sometimes, for fun, you get the ginormous hand chimes, bass chimes down there as well. This one's a problem, because if you put a mic up front, well, your distance to the back row is so big that you hardly hear them. It's really hard to get a good balance. This one's tricky. A creative solution that I've been happy with is that I will put, in 2 microphone scenario, I'll put one mic out front, probably about 8 feet back, and I'd put another microphone behind the back table, aiming towards the table, about head high, but about maybe 4 or 5 feet back there, capturing the back, and that would be a left channel microphone and a right channel. So if you closed your eyes with headphones on, it takes the 2 rows and creates it more of a soundscape of a straight line almost. So I've done the same kind of thing with 4 mics pretty successfully, and that is I put one mic on the high end roughly, and again I'm getting kind of this kind of coverage with that. I'll put a second mic over here on the end of the treble line, and back behind I've got a stereo mic, and I'm capturing this way and I'm capturing that way. Okay, but what I will do is I will make the high end left, and I will also make the treble clef also left, and I'll put the bass 2 mics to the right and to the right. And again, what I'm trying to accomplish with that is to I'm going to switch back to my camera here. What I'm trying to accomplish with that is to get a better soundscape left and right from the audio pickup, and that's worked out very well also. So mic placement has a lot of science to it. Andy is right, distance matters, and if you get something that you like, stick with it. I will also add that the top table picks up no matter where you put a mic. You hear the high bells. It's like piccolo. Bass bells, generally you get to hear those as well, but not as much. And I place the mic for the bass closer than I do the mic for the upper trebles, because I want to get more presence on the low end, and In the mid-range, I bring those up as well, probably about 5 feet, 6 feet away from the table. So that's what, 5 feet from the battery, 7 feet for the upper table, and about 5 feet from the base table if you're doing four mics. And again, that gets a pretty decent pickup. What else is there? Do you all have any questions about any of that?
We did have one question in the chat while people are thinking. Someone, Dale asked, what height is ideal for a condenser if it's 10 feet from the table edge?
Andy, you got an opinion on that?
Try 10 to 12 feet and see if you like it. Much higher under really special conditions with a room, but usually about 10 feet.
I think that would probably be really good in a large space. As I said, I record in smaller spaces quite often, and we don't have the 10 feet. But I personally I like the 6 to 7 feet high, and the reason is that you get the audience to hear what handbells do, which is as you do the stroke and then bring it up, you get that resonance coming off the lip of the bell just as the audience hears it as well. So I generally go about head high. Plus, my mic stands don't support 10 feet up.
Okay. Well, as you indicated, people have very different opinions about what is the right handbell sound. I listened to one of your most recent ones. And yeah, we're after different things, and we have different gear, different approaches. And like you said, it's not like one is right, but people are going to have very different opinions. And I encourage people to develop their own preference, know what sound you like, and then ideally ask the people who recorded that how they did it.
Yeah, and I think so, absolutely. And you also, as you're setting up something for yourselves to record, you really have to think through the room, and place yourself where you want your audience to hear you from. If it's a sanctuary, do you want your audience to hear you from the 15th row? If it's a closer in kind of a sound, do you want them to be where the director is? I mean, where do you want to place your listener? And personal taste, like Andy said, kind of takes precedence. Wherever you feel comfortable with, try different things. Your space will tell you what is good for you, and your ears will tell you what's good for you. But I'd say try everything you can. Absolutely.
Okay. Who else has questions?
Okay.
You can unmute and say them, or if you feel more comfortable, you can put them in the chat.
One thing I want to throw in for sure is when going on site to record, it's helpful to have a pair of headphones that you can trust, as in what those headphones sound like, and that, oh, it's telling me the truth about the distance of the mic to the bell, and you can make judgments with it.
Mm-hmm.
And those would be your headphones that you bring and have spent time learning how they sound.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, come on. People have to have questions. Oh, Pat's trying to unmute. We'll give him just a second.
I'm curious. How many people have tried recording? I'm going to ask the same question for live streaming. Let me get to the gallery thing. Yeah, how many people have recorded their ensembles for like a CD or archival? Just kind of raise your hands. It'd be fine. Okay, good. Looks like about on this screen maybe 20% or so. Good.
There.
Good. Would you do it again?
Oh yeah.
No hands. Several, yeah.
I think you
Okay.
will after this, right?
Well, it's like live streaming. I'll say this, that your first efforts are not going to be so hot. Um, Maybe the second one would be a little bit better, but you're still not happy with it. But it's as you get more experience, as you learn your space, as you learn your equipment, as you learn with your ears what you're listening for, what kind of sound you want to produce, that will get you focused in on what's good for you and your group. So going back to what Andy and I have been saying, just try all kinds of things until you're happy with it. Season to taste.
And we could also give ideas, because when I hear a recording, I can sometimes have ideas about improving it. I bet Bob can too, given your experience.
There's always that. Pat, did you find a
Yeah.
new?
Am I okay? There we go. I did. I typed it in. How do you? We've oftentimes taken our additional instruments and recorded them separately after the fact, and then post production had our engineer put them in. How do you feel about that? Is that better, worse, just different?
Yeah, for all the CD work that I do for the music publishers, I prefer that honestly.
Okay. Okay.
It's easier. You get a final finished handbell only version, and you can put headphones on the artist, and it's much more connected. There are techniques to be able to match them up better. Entrances and exits, for example, you can work with ideas on that. But that also, in my mind, also gives you complete total control over balance. Even within a performance, you can compensate for the artist not playing strongly enough in one spot or too strong perhaps, and rebalance in post-production so that you get a good end result out of it.
Okay,
Um,
thanks.
Hi everybody. Sorry I was late. Work got long because Pacific time. But I'm gonna jump onto that one really fast because I just had to tackle that with my group. We just did some recording, and we had a singer with the group. And in our case, the group was following the singer. It wasn't the singer following the group. And in that case, I did have to record the singer and the bells simultaneously in order for that to work. There would be no way to go back and add a singer later because the bells have to cue off of what she was doing. And I totally jerry-rigged it and just did like some quilts on music stands around the room to kind of isolate it as best I could. And it turned out pretty well in the recording. So it just depends on the situation.
Yep.
I like the quilts on the stands idea. I've used a bell cushion to make a tambourine a bit quieter. And on the other side, when we record demos for Jeffers and Beckenhorst with the Raleigh Ringers, those are done live. And you're right, we don't have as much control over volume, and we end up putting the trumpet way back in the corner. And it would be easier to control volumes if we recorded them separately in post, no doubt about it. But I had to throw that in because I'm sure you've heard some of those recordings.
I believe on our last CD, we had to build like a foam fort around one of the instrumentalists.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the way we were set up, they were backed up to a stone wall. So getting them farther away was just giving them more of a stone shell. So we kind of encased them in foam. So you kind of do what you have to do, right?
Right.
Yeah. Hey, let me throw one other thought out there about, since we're talking about this space, not the larger spaces, but if you have a smaller space to record in, go in there before the bells get set up, walk around the space, do a single hand clap and listen. You might find that you'll get this flat wall on one side versus a flat wall on the other side. Hand clap once and you get this kind of sound out of it. And that's just sound bouncing off of parallel surfaces. One way to deal with that, if you have extra foam, that's great. But you also, with handbell cases, open them up and set them out around the perimeter, and it provides something to break up the sounds that get reverberated back and forth. Also, if you find that hot spot that gets you that kind of sound, don't put a microphone on that spot.
We did have one more question in the chat, and then we could probably keep going forever, but we'll switch to live streaming. But Kath asks if there's ever a need to record ambient room background in case you need to layer a retake, especially with a live recording.
Are you talking about like for noise reduction?
She says, she says a retake.
It sounds like she's trying to mimic the sound of a live recording in a studio setting, which maybe you want to do. I don't know. I've never found a use for something like that. But it would be incredibly hard to redub a live recording because the video wouldn't sync with the audio if you're trying to do it that way.
Right, but if you're trying to repair, this is getting into the repair world. If you're trying to repair a sound that you didn't catch and try to re-record just a little snippet of it or something like that, and if you did that and just plugged it in, it would sound different, is what I think I'm hearing her say. Yeah, there is a software. It's a big brother to what I use. I'll put it that way. It's pretty pricey software that can capture the background ambiance and apply it to match something that doesn't have that background ambiance to it. So there is that. The other option would be to, yes, in the recording space, record a minute, half a minute of just dead silence in your space, and you'll have that. And if you had to use it, a different version, you can just mix the two together and kind of sort of put you in that same space that you were in. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's the only way I could see a fix out of that.
Any last questions before we switch topics?
So this is Jim Sims with Capital Ringers, and I got a question about from a standpoint of stagecraft. Without getting into the subject of the pandemic that's out there in the world, any suggestions, advice, or considerations that any of you may have given to social distancing? I saw on Facebook in Handbell People, there's been a discussion, and I've been following that. And I know one group actually performed, I believe it was Amazing Grace. So what, relative to, particularly to audio, whether it's live or not, and considering video as well as the audio, and what you've already presented, which by the way was, thank you. Any thoughts about that we should consider if we're going to adhere to the CDC guidelines for social distancing? Thank you.
You could capture the sound of a room with a pair of mics in a place that sounds good. There are a lot of stereo configurations people would use with cardioids. That's one of them. ORTF, 110-degree angle, about 7 inches apart. And then start moving it forward and back until you get a sound that you like. That would get not much detail of the sound of the bell, but you would capture the sound of the bells in the church. And that's a place to start, even with spread out ensembles.
Yeah, the only thing I can come up with on that is, number one, we've never dealt with that before, so it's all guesswork. But I think if you had to have a social distance space and you're trying to record, I think you take the mics way further back and try to get a more blended sound out of it. That's the only tip or suggestion I would have on it as well. It's a good question.
We had one more question in our chat, and it's from Erin. She asks, our group has made CDs using a professional recording studio, but not many people listen to CDs anymore. Any thoughts on replacements to share with an audience that they can keep? Just a collection of MP3s? I do want to ask, Erin, if you will pipe up or write in the chat, are you saying people don't listen to CDs anymore, or they don't want the physical CDs anymore?
That's what I'm guessing. I know our group, all of our stuff is up on Spotify and things like that. I'm not the person who did that. I think the person who did that went through CD Baby or a service like that to have our music accessible in that way. And we're a small community group. It's paid based on how many people listen, not us paying them, kind of a thing. So that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
There's some services out there for that.
I will also say one of the options we had through our CD duplication company was to get something they call drop cards. So it's basically a digital download card. We are up on iTunes and other places as well, but with the drop card, you can set your own price, and then they go in and they download the files, and it's only at one download. They're told you can't share this, all the same legal things. But you're also allowed then to bypass the fees that Apple charges. So it's nominal, but it's a little bit more, and we all run on pretty tight budgets, so every little bit helps. I'm sure you could do a similar thing without using an actual CD production company, meaning somebody physically making your CDs. But we've had those, and we've been offering them, and we've seen people grab them up. So
I think we're in a time of transition. I'm old enough, been around long enough to know the transition time between cassettes to CDs and how it kind of blended for a couple of years. But the idea was always, we're going to go CDs. It just took a while for everyone to catch on and to do that, and for enough cars, literally, to have CD players, because that was the key. When the cars started having CD players, that's when the industry went to doing CDs. So there was that transition time. I believe we're in another transition time. The problem with this one is that we're trying to transition out of CDs, but into what? I think that's the issue. I know the publishers are having discussions about how to deliver their music, if not through a mailer and a CD, physical CD. They know they want to get away from it, but they haven't found the right method to do so yet. I think we're in a transition time. So it will still need to be quality recordings made. You'll still have that, but how you repackage that and deliver that, we haven't seen a good example of it just yet.
And I don't know, we've found with our group that people still buy a lot of CDs just because they want to support the group, not necessarily because they want to go and listen to the CD later. So I think it's still an important fundraising tool for physical concerts.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm the one that asked the question. It was dovetailing off of all of your wonderful descriptions about the recording technology, which I really appreciated listening to it about miking. And we have appreciated having a professional in a recording studio make those recordings for us so that we could make a CD and then sell it at concerts. But the last one we made was 5 years ago, and we've been having conversations about now what, right? So I just thinking about the value of having a really well done recorded piece of music. Now how do we get it to people? So yeah, thanks for your ideas. I appreciate it, everybody.
Yeah, I don't know how many other people do what I do, but I will buy CDs, and occasionally I'll listen to it on a CD, but a lot of times I just import it onto my laptop. I just have the CD as a way of not losing that somewhere on my laptop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a millennial thing.
Well, but just like we saw the cars switching from cassette to CD, we're seeing laptops dropping the CD port. Yeah. My last two laptops haven't had that option. So if you give me a physical CD, I can't do anything with it except play it in my car. And that's probably the least amount of time I spend listening to music is in my car. So
my car doesn't even have a CD player anymore.
Oh, God, doesn't either. I have nowhere where I can listen to a CD except on a really old computer. So yeah. Anyway, I kind of hijacked that. Let's get back to our technology gurus. I always appreciate it.
For means of a segue, it's great to take that kind of technology now and put it on YouTube, because we have such a visual art form. People need to see the bells, not necessarily hear the bells, in order for it to really come across. And so I think now getting into YouTubing and live streaming and posting videos, I think is really kind of the future of where that's headed. It's not a way to monetize, but it's a way to get your art form out there.
Yeah. So that is an excellent segue. So we're going to shift a little bit in our discussion, and we're going to talk about live streaming. No, Jim, 8 tracks are not option. Sorry about that. So you already met Bob earlier, and Derek was able to join us. He slipped in from work. If you don't know Derek, he is the technical director at Good Luck Macbeth Theater in Reno, Nevada. And in addition to serving on the National Board of Handbell Musicians of America, he is also half of the dynamic duo who brings performances at National Summer to your computer screen live every summer. He also rings with Tintabulations Handbell Ensemble and Sonos Handbell Ensemble. So they're going to give you a good overview on live streaming and teach us all everything they know, right? In 20 minutes, right? No.
That may cover
20 minutes.
Go, Derek, go.
Go. Okay, cool. So live streaming is really, really useful to us these days. Technology really allows us to take our video and put it out there on the internet in real time much easier than it used to. So there's really 4 basic elements to your live stream. There's the capturing of the video and audio. There's the encoding of the audio and video. There's the uploading to the internet. And then there's the broadcasting part where people actually watch it. So there are 4 steps. And so you kind of need to tackle each step one at a time as you go along. So you just spent the last 40 minutes talking about capturing audio and video, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. But what you do need is you need to get that into your computer somehow. And you can do that through some sort of an audio interface, depending on what your setup is. If you're like at a church or somewhere that already has a big AV setup built into it, you can probably steal a feed off of their mixing console and then feed it into your computer through an interface. We need some kind of an audio interface. Those are usually about $100 for a decent one. That'll give you 2 channels in and out of your computer. Because the goal is to get all the audio and video into your computer at the same time. So as far as video capturing goes, Bob is an expert on that kind of stuff. I'll pass it over to Bob for a second.
Okay, cool. Yeah, video capture. Let me see, where are we on this thing? I don't know. Video capture.
Kind of following our notes.
Yeah, we'll forego that. Webcams are the inexpensive way to do this. We've used that successfully at National, and I've used them successfully for a bunch of years now. Regular webcams, decent one would be $100 maybe. I will say that you want to. The webcams come in 2.0, USB 2.0 or USB 3.0 capability. The 3s are more expensive. The difference in them is how much information they can pass, so how much video information can go through. The 3.0 is much better. You can get a higher 1080 kind of resolution, 60 frames kind of resolution out of that, where you can't get that out of the 2.0 necessarily. So we've done webcams through the software at National. We've used multiple webcams, and we'll talk software later, so you can do that. The other method is what I'm personally using right now. I have a camcorder. In fact, it's an old one. It's a Canon something. I don't even know what it is, but it records to SD. Okay, but it has an HDMI out from it, and so I have an HDMI out cable going from that to a little device which I cannot pick it up and show you because it's in use. And it's on the floor right now, but it's a little device. I think Derek's looking for his.
I have one around here somewhere.
And it has HDMI in. It accepts the signal from the camera, HDMI, and because laptops do not have here, Derek, say something so they can see that.
So this is an Elgato Cam Link. It is literally just HDMI on one end and USB 3.0 on the other end. And so this will take any of your HDMI feeds from any camera and put it into a form of the computer. I think this was also about $100.
Yeah. Thank you. I've got the same brand. I have a little bit different model than he has, but it does the same thing. It takes the HDMI in and then converts it to USB 3, which then can go into your computer. Computers do not have HDMI inputs; they have an HDMI output, not an input. So that's why you have to get the thing converted. So I'm using a higher quality camera as a result, and we'll be doing that next time we have a national seminar. We'll be rocking with probably 2 of these really nice cameras in use this next time around. But it's still, either way you go, webcam or camcorder type of camera, that'll work for you. It'll be something that will give you good visual out of it, and then port it into the computer as a result.
Yeah, the reason why we're not talking about streaming off of your cell phone at the moment, because it's very easy to set up your cell phone and just stream straight to Facebook Live. But for our art form, the microphone on a cell phone really doesn't pick up handbells very well. It doesn't pick up the frequency range you need in order to really hear more than a 5-octave handbell ensemble. So that's why we kind of steer people away from doing it that way, and we talk more about doing it this way, which seems more complicated, trying to feed everything into a computer and then out to the internet. But it gives you a much better version at the end. And also keep in mind when you're doing this, for live streaming purposes, the audio quality is probably going to be more important than the video quality. So if you need to spend more time on one of them, spend more time on the audio, because that's why people are watching, because they want to hear you. The video is very nice to add that visual element to it, but even a low quality video stream with a high quality audio stream will turn out way better than if you have bumbly audio. So once you get everything into the laptop, you need to be able to control everything. And so this comes to encoding software. You need some kind of an encoding software. Now, Bob and I for years have used OBS, which is open broadcasting software. It is free. It is open source. It is wonderful. There are lots and lots of help files out there online for it. So it's a great and easy way to jump in to live streaming. I'm pretty sure that's what Bob is using right now to control all of his cameras.
Nope.
Oh, you're doing, okay, cool. I thought you were gonna like, anyways. Yeah, I'm not that crazy. I've over the last few months, I've also gotten very familiar with vMix, which is kind of the upgraded version of OBS. It is not free. However, they have a 90-day free trial, so it's great to try it out. That gives you free access to their pro version, so you can see how it works. But anyways, either of these 2 softwares, what it does is it takes your audio and your video and it syncs it together. And in the software, that's where you can add images, you can add other videos that are pre-recorded, you can layer things on top of each other, you can add lower thirds. That's where you do all of that mixing and editing, so that way the product that you send out to the internet is polished. So you have this encoding software, and it takes all your audio and video and it mixes it all together and it encodes it. And then you need to push it out to the internet. And this is where people have a lot of problems. This is probably the hardest part of the whole process, because you have to have a solid internet connection for it to work. Kind of a good rule of thumb is if you ever run a speed test on your internet connection, you need to have at least 4 megabytes of upload speed, which is different than watching Netflix. What we're doing right now, this is all download. Most of this is download because we're sending images to your computer. But what you need is upload speed, and that usually is a lot lower than you think it is. So be sure you go to whatever venue you're going to be live streaming at and test all of their internet connections, because you need to find one that's at least 4 megabytes per second upload speed in order to get an HD feed to the internet. And along with that, you want to try to make sure that you always use a hardwired connection. It is possible to do this over Wi-Fi, and I'm sure most of you sitting at home right now are on Wi-Fi, but Wi-Fi can be jiggly in its connection, which does not make good live streaming. So a hardwired connection is always the best. So keep that in mind. Cell networks also, sometimes a cell network will be better than your Wi-Fi. Sometimes it'll be much worse. It just depends on the venue. So, but as a backup plan, using your phone as a mobile hotspot is a backup plan as well. So when you go into a venue, you want to test out all 3 of those options to see which ones will work best and which ones you can use as a backup in case something goes wrong, because something will always go wrong when you're live streaming. It is a matter of fact.
Yeah, let me throw a couple of thoughts on yeah, it is true
Yeah.
on this the internet part of this. Yeah, definitely wired is best. It avoids one hop of the technology of the data being wireless. If it's wireless, it's got to go through a wireless box, and then it's the wireless box is connected in hardwired from there. So if you can eliminate that extra hop, that helps the signal get to where it's going quicker, if you will, smoother. So Derek mentioned 4 megabyte or more upload, and that is very critical. A lot of the internet providers, they like to give you lots of speed, and they define speed as download speed. And so that what they will likely do is they'll give you this much download speed and give you this much upload speed because they assume that you're not doing what we're trying to do. They're assuming that all you upload are clicks on your keyboard, and that's about it. So you might have an internet connection that is imbalanced for our needs. Sometimes the internet providers can be worked with. You can call them and say, on my account, can you rebalance the download and versus the upload speed and get it more equitable? Sometimes they will do that. I did have that exact thing happen when I went to a venue whose internet connection failed on them, essentially. And so it was showtime virtually for us. And I threw a hotspot together on a cell phone because that was the best signal I could find. And I called my cell phone provider and said, I know I've got good down speed, but I have to have upload. Can you do something? And within 40 minutes of making that phone call, they reallocated my account so that I had almost a 50-50 down and up. And we did that live stream for that concert from a hotspot on my cell phone, and it actually worked pretty well. It was stable all the way through. I was shocked. So that is a possibility, and I would call that worst case scenario, but it is possible.
Always good, as always a good backup. And this is why you want to do a lot of practicing. If you have the chance, go and live stream a couple rehearsals before you or even just live stream the dress rehearsal while the group is warming up before they actually perform. So that way you can get a feel for how does the internet react. I know I was doing a live stream once and I had everything set up and it was great and it was all connected. And then the audience showed up, all of their cell phones pinged the network at the same time, and I lost internet for like a song or two. So you never know what's going to happen when you're live streaming. It's great. So we've captured all the audio and video. We've got the audio and video into the computer. The software inside the computer is mixing it all together and sending it up to the internet, and we have the bandwidth to get it up to the internet. So now you have to have a platform in order to watch the video. And so this is the broadcasting part of it. And there are two main platforms for doing this. There's YouTube and Facebook, are your two main platforms. Each of them has their pros and cons to using it. YouTube gives you a much more higher definition feed. In YouTube, you can stream in HD. All the audio is streamed in high definition as well, in stereo. So you can really stream a very good package onto YouTube. The difficulty with YouTube is you have to send people to YouTube to find it. Most people aren't just hanging out on YouTube every day looking for things to watch, unless it happens to be the DB concert from this past February, but that's a whole different story. That was a interesting adventure. But anyway, so yes, so YouTube is great. It gives you high definition, but you have to send people there. Facebook, on the other hand, puts your feed in front of lots of people right away because everyone's on Facebook, and Facebook loves to put live video above everything else on Facebook. So like in the prioritization of how Facebook puts things on your feed, right now it tends to put live video at the top of that list. However, Facebook also in the process compresses your video a lot when it goes up on Facebook. So you lose a lot of quality. It's getting better, and I've noticed that Facebook now has an entire like back end to their live stream, just like YouTube has. So I haven't tried streaming a handbell concert to Facebook in the last 6 months, so maybe the compression is better than it used to be. But for what we've been doing, the audio quality ends up getting really mumbled on Facebook when you're doing music, as opposed to just talking. So be careful with that and try it out. But anyway, so those are your two main platforms. You won't be using something like this to broadcast a concert because this is just not the right platform for concert broadcasting. So anyway, so those are the 4 steps to live streaming in a nutshell in like 20 minutes. You're capturing your audio video, you're encoding your audio and video, you're broadcasting it up to the internet, and then we're watching it on either Facebook or YouTube. So that is.
Yeah, let me jump backwards just a little bit in the capture part onto a laptop. We didn't talk about what you mean, what kind of laptop, and what's needed on the laptop. Might be good.
As fast as possible.
On a laptop, it can be Mac or PC, whichever you want. That's fine. An i7 processor is ideal. I think they will work at i5, but if you do multiple cameras and you're trying to do all that with an i5 processor, it might give you some glitches every now and then. So an i7 processor, something pretty powerful, would be a good way to go. They're harder to come by these days in laptops, but USB ports on laptop, very critical if you're going to want to use a webcam, or 2 or 3 or 4 for that matter. I've actually tested on mine up to 4 webcams, and it actually worked.
Unless those of you who are really tech savvy want to go research NDI, but that's your project.
True. So ports on the laptop are important. It can be USB 3.0. It could also be USB-C, which is just a little oval kind of thing port. Either of those we can find ways to get a webcam or camcorder signal into. Another item that's harder to come by these days is an audio input port on a computer in stereo. They've taken away one of them. They've taken away the split between a microphone port and a headphone port, and they've made it into a combo port. So it does either or, but not both at the same time. So if you put a external sound source into that, it looks like a headphone jack into your computer, well then you don't have headphone capability unless you have some other way of getting headphone signal out of your laptop, which there are ways to do that. So I think that's all the keys of a laptop that are needed. What else are we missing?
I mean, we can go into a whole discussion about actually running live streams as well. But
yeah, I think the other part is that going back to the software, I think for the longest time, the software that was available was single camera only. It was not if you wanted to do multi-camera kind of live streaming, you had to have a professional level system that was really pricey. Then came OBS software, free, and it actually allows you to do I don't think it's unlimited, but it's more than I could ever imagine putting input sources into it. So it's really awesome for free. And along came vMix, which is I don't know, at times it's a big brother to OBS, but you also have to pay for that level of extras on that. And both of those will accept multiple types of external camera sources, and that's really a good thing when it comes to running concerts. Let me back up even further. Derek started, I think, saying that he held up a cell phone, saying, "Here's how you can do a live stream using a cell phone." I've seen people do iPads for a live stream. My problem for you with that is placement. Where do you hold your cell phone, or on a tripod or whatever? Wherever that is, a lot of times that's in the back of the performance area. Well, wherever that is, that's your microphone too. So you're picking up your video from a greater distance, and your audio is getting picked up also from a great distance. And remember, that audio is not of that great of depth of quality. So to go through a laptop where you can input an external audio source, like what we talked about in the recording session. In fact, I use the same microphone setups in live streaming as much as I can, similar to what I do for recording sessions. So to use that into the laptop and then use external cameras to get the cameras physically closer to the performers, that's the advantage. That's a good quality for live streaming.
Yeah, just to piggyback onto that, YouTube has recently changed their terms of service, so you can no longer live stream to YouTube from a cell phone or tablet until you reach certain benchmarks, which none of our groups have reached. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, so cell phone is only available for Facebook live streaming at this moment.
Cool.
So while we wait for people who have questions, I have one question, and it might be a little bit of the elephant in the room for both audio recording and for live streaming.
Copyright.
Can I ask the copyright question?
Yes. So this is like the rabbit hole of rabbit holes.
Yes. Okay.
But maybe just do a quick overview so that we don't encourage people to break copyright and laws and all these things.
Let me give you my boilerplate answer that I always give everybody. Copyright law is meant to make sure that our copyright holders make money off of their streams or off of their intellectual property. Copyright law, however, has not caught up with the internet age. And so this is where you have to be a little careful. So live streaming and video performance are not covered under the mechanical license that you get when you purchase a piece of music. However, as of right now, most of our handbill music publishers do not care if you post videos to YouTube or post videos to YouTube, as long as you tag them with the title and the composer. They seem to be pretty happy with it because it is advertising for them and it allows other groups to find their music. So do be aware that technically, yes, it is breaking the law, but for the moment, that does not seem to be an issue with our handbill publishers. Now, if you have an arrangement of a pop song that is not covered under any of that, and that's where you can get yourself into some trouble. YouTube has something called Content ID, and what Content ID does is Content ID goes through and scans every video that's uploaded to YouTube and searches for copyrighted material. So this is how YouTube has gotten around the copyright issue, because they flag all of the videos that have copyrighted material in them and send the revenue from those videos to the copyright holders. So it's not legal still, but it's YouTube's workaround on how to deal with that. Facebook, I do not know their policies on. They always change, so I would not bet that Facebook has a system like that in place. But as far as YouTube uploading goes, I would encourage people to still upload their handbill videos to YouTube. Technically, again, not legal, but handbill publishers don't seem to mind, and Copyright ID does flag videos. I know Bob just had one flagged yesterday, and he was uploading, so it works.
I did. I just uploaded a video mini concert. Y'all need to go look at it. Included in that concert was a performance of Thriller and Bohemian Rhapsody, and I got flagged. It had no impact on us, but it caused me to think about something that that was a performance of an arrangement for handbells. Okay, well, we're talking about getting the handbill people to say it's okay for you to do that. They're the copyright holders. However, I got flagged for it because and told that we could not make money off our video because they wanted to give the any money rights to the copyright holder of the tune. So for a Thriller, Michael Jackson's estate would receive that. So even though the music is handbill published as an arrangement, the ultimate copyright is held by Michael Jackson estate in this case. So and it's on YouTube. So anyway, we got flagged. I thought that was really cool actually, because that means that the software recognized that we played something called Thriller. Yay us!
It always makes me happy when that happens actually. Chandler just asked in the chat if flagging impacts the video's availability. So when something gets flagged for copyright, the option goes to the copyright holder what they want to do with that video. 95% of the time, they will decide to leave the video up and take the monetization off of it. So most of the time, if your video gets flagged for copyright, it will not be taken down. Every once in a while, I do run into something that does get taken down because of copyright, but that rarely ever happens. Now, the rule of thumb with all of this is if you have any questions about any of this, contact the publisher at the bottom of the piece of music, and they will be able to tell you what their rules are about posting music, either live streaming or video. Those are two very different things, and you need to specify which one you're going to be doing when you ask them. But anyways, that is copyright in a nutshell. I am not a lawyer, but that seems to be the rule of thumb at the moment as far as it pertains to handbill music on YouTube.
I will interject quickly that, you know, this is a community group roundtable, but we also have a lot of people who work at churches. And I worked at a mega church for almost 10 years. And there was this misconception, which is not true. Your CCLI license only covers worship services while you were there. So you can't just say, well, I have a CCLI license, I can do whatever I want with it. You can, but that's copyright infringement. So just be aware that that is not a blanket okay to do whatever you want with that content. And again, contact the publishers of whatever music you're performing. Even if it's in a church, there are restrictions on that CCLI license. So.
Right. I remember these rule of thumbs apply to posting videos for free on YouTube for everyone to see. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to put them behind a paywall or do anything like that, that's where you're going to run into some issues. So if you're just posting them on YouTube for people to see for free for the public, then make sure you credit the composer and song title. But yes, again, this does not apply to anything that's behind a paywall.
And we had Dale put in the chat that he'd like to see HMA come up with a one license option to make it easier on everyone.
I know.
I agree that would be great, except you would have to get every publisher ever to agree to the same terms and to release their catalog for this. So there's so many different publishers of music, so many things that are unpublished, which then you get the permission of the person who wrote it. So this again,
for several years now, as I've posted usually performance videos on YouTube, I post it and then I and then I turn around and I email the publisher and I say, I have posted this, here's a link, here's what I've put on it as far as the information, do you want anything else? And except for two instances, they've all written back and said, yes, great, thank you for putting it out there. Could you change your wording a little bit? So I think that just an email gets it done, kind of.
Yeah. I'm very sorry. I actually have another meeting I'm supposed to be at right now with all the national seminar performers talking about this exact same thing. So I'm going to have to jump here in a moment. But thank you all for having me. And Bob and Andy, I'm sure, can answer lots more questions than I can.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Derek. And I think Derek's absolutely right that that the internet has the publishers have not caught up to the internet era just yet. So I don't think it's been a problem as of yet. To be honest, we haven't seen that. Let me throw some wrap-up thoughts in, and then we go with Q&A if we need that as well. Next steps for everybody who's considering this is to jump in and start testing with it, start playing around with it, experiment with it. Again, you're going to fail the first time, maybe even the second time, but the more experience you have, the more success you will also have. Keep your goals and your budgets in mind with Livestream. You can go super simple, super cheap, and you can go super heavy tech with a ton of money. I'll add year one or year two of our live streaming at National. One of the performances was off-site. It was in a large church, and that church was already set up for live streaming. So they graciously said, we'll just do it for you. So for that particular concert, they live streamed. Well, Derek and I went to their control room and just chatted with them and talked to them. And they had about $100,000 worth of equipment in cameras and mics and mixers and all this stuff. And they went to a laptop running OBS software, the free software, just exactly what we were using. I found that fascinating that after all that money, they still threw a free software package. So you can go high on the budget or go easy or mix. Find some local experts, and as of the last couple of months, many more local experts exist now in churches. So find those that have been doing live streaming and go visit with them, talk to them, and find out what is it that they do? How do they solve this problem? What would they recommend you do for this or that? Who knows? Maybe you can get them to come do your live stream for you. That'd be awesome. And the last thing is to ask around. Handbell community is very, very supportive of each other. And if you have any questions, you can honestly talk to anyone in the handbell community. There's everyone will respond. So reach out and ask a question as you go through, which is now Q&A time.
I have a question. Who asked about the handbell 8-track?
That was Jim Sims, right?
Okay, here's one. It's the real thing.
But can you play that in your car?
If I use a portable, yeah.
Of course you can, Andy. I am going to address, because somebody's putting this in the chat, I've talked to Brian and Kevin, and we had so much great information and so many great questions that we're going to move that virtual ensemble and one portion choir to next week so that we don't shortchange those guys. It wouldn't be fair to them to tell them you have 5 minutes, go. So we're going to move that to next week. They've been gracious enough to be flexible about that. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to that tonight, but you know, there's so many things to talk about with miking and recording and live stream that we wanted to play it a little bit by ear and see how the questions went. We did have a couple of questions in chat. Dale is asking Bob, do you recommend that community groups acquire a performance license, i.e. ASCAP or BMI, when performing in public spaces that are not performance venues?
Wow, that's a licensing copyright thing. You know, if you're a small entity, you're not going to be flagged and brought to justice, as it were. If you are an established Philadelphia orchestra, you know, and you do something and you don't have a license for something, they're going to come after you. So I think, as we said already, the internet hasn't quite caught up to how to deal with all of this copyright and performance arrangements and whatnot. And I just feel like I feel pretty safe in saying we can still just go ahead and post whatever we want, given that we do reference the publisher, and I've started doing the ordering information of pieces as well on posts. And just try to seek permission as best we can, but you know, and try not to ask for money for your videos. That would be a problem.
Any other questions? Oh, Stephanie Wiltsey asked recommendations for recording low bass chimes.
That's a good one. The low bass chimes resonate differently than handbells. Like the low C2, I believe its sound wave is something like, Andy, help me out here, it's something like 6 or 8 feet. You know, the cycle is that long. So it becomes an issue to do that. I put them, when I do recordings in my smaller spaces, I put the chimes, bass chimes, in a corner so we get maximum reflection of their sound forward towards where the mic is, and that's worked out pretty well. They resonate. Also in post-production, I'm able to go down into that range and boost the dynamics up just a little bit, and still clean out the noise that's in the background. So we can kind of rebalance in post-production a little bit for that. But yeah, it's a harder one to deal with. I'll tell you one thing that I had experienced about a year ago. I recorded a group in a very noisy space with the air handler going full blast and no way to stop it. And so we went ahead and did the session. In post-production, the low bass chimes I was able to retain. The low bronze bells in the twos I was not. The resonance, the frequencies of the bronze, maybe it had to do more with how many overtones were there versus a chime based being more pure fundamental. But I lost a lot of the bronze twos in that space because I had to get rid of the background noise, and it took some of the good stuff with it. It was very difficult to deal with.
Noise reduction does often come at a cost of fidelity.
Yeah.
And on occasion, I've had to roll off low bass because of an incredible amount of noise. But the omnidirectional mics will pick up more bass than the ear hears. It's worth a try. That's what we use on the Raleigh Ringer CDs at this point. Just 2, with the exception of one piece, and all the CDs actually used a third mic, but everything's used a pair.
Hey Andy, on if you were trying to capture them up close, how far away would you put a mic to get to the bass chime sound?
I try to avoid a spotlight sound, which you can get from a cardioid mic if it gets too close. When we made our videos at Mamandi, our bass spot mic was an Omni over the right table as you look at it. And something like that, you might be able to get away with 4 feet with an Omni because it wouldn't spotlight too much. That's a place to start.
Yeah, it's a tough one, especially in the larger space, because the resonance just goes everywhere. But that's good to know about an Omni. That's a nice one to know about.
Just personal preference. Everybody's got one.
All right.
So Wayne has a question. How do you remove an errant noise or a B flat 3 against a G major chord? Evan's response was to record again.
I know
Maybe
why
record
you
again
asked
and
that.
replace the ringer.
I actually can do that.
Do you have Melodyne?
No, but I've got another piece of software that I can make a change out of that. Yeah, it's interesting. You have to have software that you can highlight the frequency of the fundamental that you're hearing and its overtones, and remove them out. Basically, you can go find, if you're lucky, you can go find a B natural 3 as in his example, and paste it in. And so you get rid of one and you paste in the new with its overtones. I've done it several times. It's very sneaky.
Melodyne is a software that will allow you to identify the note and shift it up a half step. And I've done that once.
Yeah, it happens when you do recordings. It's really interesting. You know, you think you got a good run all the way through a measure 12. You finally got a good run, and you're happy, and you move on, and then you get back and you listen to it, and you go, "Oops, there is a wrong note there," and so now you got to go hunting for a solution. So
the easiest thing is if you can find if that same chord or same section happens somewhere else in the piece that you did play it correctly and can cut and paste that in, that's the easiest. But you're not always that lucky that you can find that existing chord somewhere else.
Yeah, recording sessions I'm able to do a lot of that because we do multiple takes. But yeah.
I know for our group, we have, in addition to the ringers and the director and Andy running all the equipment, we have somebody sitting there whose job is just to listen and watch the music, which is really helpful because with the headphones plugged into Andy's gear, you can really hear everything so much clearer. And so having that person sit there and point out, and they'll be like, I think this is wrong. And they'll be like, yeah, that was wrong. So no, this is not the time to pretend as a ringer that you didn't miss something. If you're recording for a CD, this is the time to make it known that something needs to be re-recorded. But we're right about an hour and a half, and I don't want to keep people forever. Thank you so much to Derek, Andy, And to Bob for being here. If you joined late, I didn't get a chance to remind you, but if you joined late and didn't, before you go, if you'll put in the chat where you're from and what group you're from, that would be great. We just love to see where everyone is from. And if you missed the announcement, we're going to move the virtual ensemble and one-person choir to next week. So we'll have Brian and Kevin again next week, and we'll put all that information up on our Facebook page. But we don't want to take up any more of your time tonight. We could talk about recording and this forever and ever, and probably still have new things that we're learning. So thank you so much, guys. And thank you to Derek, who already had to hop off for another call. And thank you to everyone who was able to join us tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.